more time in college football than we normally do. We're going with the probably the most prestigious trophy in all of college sports. That's the Heisman. Was awarded, I believe, yesterday as of recording, and it went to Colorado's two-way star Travis Hunter, who plays both receiver and corner for the Buffaloes. And what we're going to get into here is there's a big debate. It was a very close race between him and Ashton Jeanty of the Boise State Broncos, who had a crazy year on the ground, and probably would have won the Heisman in any other year that he wasn't going up against someone as insane as Hunter. Now, I have my own opinion on it. I think I don't know how strong it is because I think this race was close, deserved to be close, and I think both players were deserving. But I'll toss it to you in terms of who you think should have won, and we can kind of get into it from there.
I think this segment is fun because I'm not a big college football guy. So I just get to sit here and look at the stats afterwards after tuning out however many months in the last little bit of this. Because this argument has been going for the last little bit. Like, this is not new. People knew that this was going to be, like, the conversation 3 months ago. And
Yes.
I remember reading all that, and now I get to tune in and take a peek at both of the stats. And after reading all of it, I it's so odd to look at two completely separate players. I think this is exactly why we don't see defensive players win the Heisman almost at all, is that it's just almost uncomparable. Like, it's just so hard. It's so hard to look at Ashton Jeanty's 2,497 rushing yards and try and compare that to Travis Hunter's like cornerback stats. Like, I don't know what to do. What's the conversion rate on that one? Like, it just, I don't know. It doesn't really work. I don't know what Travis Hunter has been able to do in the last little bit here with Colorado has been absolutely nuts. Putting up those receiving stats while also picking off or grabbing 4 picks, grabbing a few tackles. Like, he's been one of the better corners in college football in the last few years here. And then, but I don't know. I don't know. I probably would have gave it to Jeanty, to be honest with you. I think that his stats are fucking nuts. Like, to me, almost 2,500 rushing yards is just stupid. I get it. The two-way player has its novelty, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know. Is 4 picks enough to really give him that, like, he was extraordinary on both sides? I get that's impressive, but I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass. I'll toss it over to you, Caleb, so you can talk some sense.
Well, yeah. So I think I disagree, and
Okay.
I think the internet is very vocal about their support of Ashton Jeanty, and like it's totally fair. And I want to make sure I don't come off as a Jeanty hater or a Boise State hater here, because again, and I want to stress that I think in any other year, he would have won the Heisman and would have been very deserving of doing so. And I think if he had won this year, he would have been very deserving of doing so. He had an incredible season. However, I think people kind of get on the Jeanty case because it would have been such an outlier, and people love to cheer for the underdog in this case.
Yeah.
And Deion Sanders, Colorado, is kind of on everybody's hit list at a certain point where they're just fed up and annoyed with it. So yeah, it makes sense that everybody kind of jumps on the Jeanty bandwagon and immediately goes, "Oh, he got robbed" or whatever. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's a couple arguments you can make against Jeanty's case, and the first one, and I think the most important one, is conference play. And that is the very clear argument here, because there is a very clear difference in the types of opponents that Boise State was playing and the types of opponents that Colorado was playing. The Mountain West is not the same as the Big 12. And that's just a fact of college football, because there's a clear dividing line between like going out and playing a team like Arizona State this year or Iowa State this year, and then going out and playing like San Jose State or Wyoming. Like it's two completely different ball games at that point. I think Jeanty still would have had great stats if he played in the Big 12 or any other Power 4 conference, but I don't think they would have looked quite as good, just because the defenses are better. I think that's a big thing. And then I think another thing to kind of refute one of the arguments you made is just it's not. People are like, oh, like, wow, he got the Heisman because the stat that everybody cares about is that he played the most snaps. But I think it's like it's not just that he played the most snaps. He was genuinely really good at it. Like, he was over an 1,000-yard receiver, and just because he didn't have the picks on defense doesn't mean he wasn't an outstanding corner. Because, like, you can still be an outstanding corner without getting interceptions. It usually just means the teams aren't throwing the ball your way. So I think it does go both ways in terms of, it wasn't just that he played on both sides, it's that he played on both sides and was genuinely that good at both. If it was just Travis Hunter, the receiver, as a Heisman candidate, he probably wouldn't have won. If it was just Travis Hunter, the corner, he definitely wouldn't have won just because of the anti-defensive player thing.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's doing both at the level that he is, to where he could win the Biletnikoff as the nation's best receiver and win an award as the nation's best defensive player, that's something that's special, and we're never going to see for another like 50 to 100 years in college football. And it's something that deserves to be rewarded with a Heisman Trophy, in my opinion.
No, I don't disagree with any of that either. That's all very fair. And the conference play argument is absolutely the thing that everybody's jumped to immediately. Because I've heard that argument before. Like, that's not a new conversation. That was something that was brought up, I think, the first time Jeanty's name was brought into the conversation. I don't know. That's why it's tough. I don't necessarily feel like I have that much to add. I'm not a good person to defend the other side of the argument, to be fair. Because I don't disagree. Like, there is absolutely a reason that Jeanty was able to run with a 7.3 yards per carry average. That is insane. Like, you put me on the field against toddlers, I don't know if I'm doing that. Like, this dude's running over grown men and getting 7 yards on them each time. That is stupid. Like, that shouldn't be happening at any level of the game. And I mean, the other argument to that, the only argument that I'd really throw out against that is the fact that if conference play is the reason that he was able to put up inflated stats like this, why don't we see more stats to this level? Like, I know that there's been examples of it in like the last few years where I think, funnily enough, former Seahawk Rashad Penny, I saw his numbers thrown up there and went, holy fuck. Like, he was an example of that. I'm blanking on other names. Like, it's happened in the last 10 years.
And he is a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Who did he play for in college? Do you remember? Do you know?
San Diego State.
Well, there you go.
Who is also in the Mountain West, so it would
Yeah,
have been
like-
the same kind of argument.
Yeah. I guess the argument to this is again more on your side. Obviously, we've seen that this Jeanty thing can happen, once every 10 years. It happens where like a running back in one of the worst divisions just decides that he wants to be Derrick Henry for a year. And you don't see what happens with Travis Hunter very often. Like you said, it's a once. I mean, we saw it with what was it, Woodson? Didn't he do it not that long ago? I'd make the argument like once every like 20 or 30 years for Travis Hunter.
But I think it gets less and less common too. I think the only reason that Travis Hunter was allowed to play both sides was because Deion was incredibly. I think it's the best coaching decision Deion's ever made, was to allow him to do that, because I don't think many other teams would have allowed him to do that, right?
Yeah.
And Woodson didn't play both sides of the ball like Travis Hunter did. Woodson was a corner who was also a great returner, and that was his dual threat ability, which is again something that's very special and was part of what won him his Heisman in 1997. But it's not necessarily the same thing that Travis Hunter is doing. Which Travis Hunter's like, we haven't seen something like Travis Hunter since like the 50s or 60s, really.
Yeah.
So there's a reason it's so special. To kind of give the Jeanty people, because I know like they're currently in the comments right now screaming at me, because I think
Screaming at me.
I think you can. Yeah, I think screaming at both of us, because I think the one argument you can make against the conference play argument is, when they faced a team outside of their conference in a Power 4 conference, and that was the number 1 ranked currently Oregon Ducks. When they went to Oregon to play and almost beat them, and in that game, Ashton Jeanty, 25 carries, 192 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
My God.
So that it's I still think that's a hard sample size to extrapolate to a whole season. If you played a whole season in a Power 4 conference, I don't think he's getting that many yards a game. But if you are a Jeanty fan, that is what you point to, because that is great competition, the best team in the country, and he almost put up 200 yards on him. So there's your argument if you want that. I don't.
Do you think Jeanty's gonna? Is he gonna be? Is he an NFL guy going into the draft this next year? Do you know?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do you think he's gonna go high?
I've seen him projected to go in the middle of the first round,
Really?
and the team that I consistently see him getting drafted to, and this makes a lot of fucking sense, is the Dallas Cowboys. I've seen that a lot, because if there's any team in the NFL where you see, oh, their running backs suck, it's the Dallas Cowboys, and I can totally see Jerry Jones taking a shot on a big name like that. I think like that's one of the ones where I'm like, okay, that's almost like written in stone at this point. I do think he's going to be a first round pick. I think part of that has to do with the changing philosophies around running backs that we've seen in the NFL, to where we see guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry get paid so little on the free agent market and go out and be like MVP caliber guys. So I think that philosophy is shifting to say it's okay to pay running backs, it's okay to pick them early. So I think we're going to see that. Yeah, I do think Jeanty is a first-round player at this point. We'll see how he does in the college football playoff and the combine and everything, but at this point, I think he's a first-rounder.
It's very interesting how running backs have kind of flip-flopped in the last little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's seemingly happened kind of out of the blue, but it's also been something that's, if you look back in the last few years, it has been happening, where I feel like we had this conversation in the offseason about, yes, you don't pay running backs, but there are exceptions. I think it was kind of becoming that in the last year, and slowly I think I agree with you. I think we are starting to get to the point where, yeah, you can pay running backs. Like, it's starting to be okay again, which is good to see. I think the NFL's or football in general is more fun when running backs are involved. I don't think it should just be purely Patrick Mahomes throwing 50 yards every time. That's boring. We need more Marshawn Lynch's. We need more Adrian Petersons. We need more of those type guys, right? Like, that's kind of what the NFL's been missing, where like those types of, obviously I said Marshawn Lynch, not an MVP candidate, but you know what I mean. Like those types of running backs getting that kind of play and pay. I think we're going to start to see that again in the next 10 years, which is exciting. Maybe Jeanty's one of those guys.
Yeah, and it certainly seems like it. Because, I mean, you look at all the players who got paid this offseason to go to a new team as a running back, and they have all worked out, more or less. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry are the big ones. So it'll be interesting to see how Jeanty performs. I think he'll be in high demand. As for Travis Hunter, if we want to kind of wrap the conversation up here in terms of where he's going to go in the NFL, he's definitely a top 5 pick at this point. Or I think he's probably the consensus number 1 prospect, unless you need a quarterback. So it'll be very interesting to see how he goes. I've seen Jacksonville as the place for him.
Sweet Jesus.
And it'll be and it'll be interesting. I was listening to another football podcast the other day talking about his 2-way potential. But I'll maybe flip it over to you first before I kind of give my own opinion based on what I heard. Do you think that he'll be able to play both sides of the ball in the NFL, or is that something that's going to get knocked out of him at that point?
So I hate that I can't remember where I heard this, and it might, for all I know, it could be the same thing that you're turning to here. But what I heard, which I actually like a lot, I think this type of thing makes a ton of sense, is playing him as a corner and bringing him in certain packages as a wide receiver. So basically, he's more of like a special kind of. He'll come in on like third downs type guy. I think that makes a ton of sense. Like, you bring him in on the important stuff, sit him for what you don't need him for. Like, and then play him as a regular first corner. I think that's probably what's going to happen. It's kind of harder to do the other thing, because how do you choose as a defensive coordinator what is important and what's not, I guess. I don't necessarily think that works as well on the defensive side, to have him be a full-time wide receiver and sometimes a corner. I don't think that's harder to do. To answer your question, though, of whether I think he will be able to be a full-time wide receiver and a full-time corner, no. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, not at the level that it was at college. I just don't think that. It's just not going to happen. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And I would agree, and I think, because I think it's really hard it's much harder to do both at an NFL level.
So much more physical.
The argument,
like you,
yes,
I think
yeah.
that's a big part of it. Like you take like NFL guys. I know college is physical too. Like that's certainly part. Like I'm not trying to make that argument. I'm just trying to say like the guys, the 250 guys they have playing middle linebacker at the NFL level. You're gonna like Travis Hunter's gonna get hit by one of those, drop a third down ball, and not want to go back out the next drive on defense. Like that's it's not gonna happen. It like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that, but I think the bigger point that I heard on the podcast I listened to the other day, and yes, that the argument of him having a role as a full-time corner and a sometimes wide receiver was the argument they made. It was the bootleg football podcast was the one that made this argument. I think it's a really good one, and the reasons behind it are particularly they talked about learning a playbook. Because learning an NFL playbook is much more complicated than learning a college playbook, and they're much more complex.
Travis Hunter sure had to study, huh?
Yeah, because like it's overwhelming enough to just learn one side of the ball. When it comes to learning a playbook, having to learn both is a lot. So what they proposed was exactly what you said, where you play him full time on defense. But on offense, it's not even just about him being a third down receiver. It's that you have 15 to 20 designated plays where if they call this play, he's coming in. So he immediately knows what he needs to do. The amount of knowledge that he needs to keep in is immediately much smaller. But you can call that play at any time and use him at any time to say, okay, one of these plays is up. Let's put him in the game. And then he immediately knows what his role is and what he needs to do. I think that's a great idea, and I think that's probably the most likely thing.
I think that's the most realistic. I just hate limiting. Like, let's say we get to the point where Travis Hunter, obviously no one knows, no college like prospect is a 100% thing, but let's say Travis Hunter is the best. Like he ends up being one of the best wide receiver talents like in the NFL. Do you want to get halfway through a season and realize you don't have Travis Hunter doesn't know enough plays? Teams are starting to figure out the 20 plays that Travis Hunter comes out on. Like, you've used all of them because you use him that much. Like, because he just is your guy at that point. I don't know. I have a funny feeling if he wants to, like, be that two-way guy in the NFL, he's going to have to learn the playbook anyway. Like, there's no avoiding that. That's part of the game. Like, you're going to have to know both sides of the ball equally well. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's... I don't know. I agree with you. Like, I do think that's what's going to end up happening, but I still do think that teams are going to want Travis Hunter. It's kind of in the same way of, if you want us to trust you enough to play both sides, we need you to put in the work and learn both sides, right? I think there's part of that to it as well. Yeah, as hard as that would be.
And it could be a transitionary thing too, right? Where if it starts off and he's in for a select 15 or so plays, that they have, and then it expands. I think it's just about making the transition easier. But it'll be interesting to see how both these guys play in the NFL. Obviously, both very talented, and it's gonna be interesting to see them play on Sundays.
Yeah, no, it definitely will be, especially if he goes to Jacksonville. God knows everybody would be tuning in for that. Because, that'd just be terrific. They probably do need a wide receiver and a corner, so I guess that's killing two birds with one stone.
Two birds with one stone. That's how you do it.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, sweet Jesus. Is Jacksonville seriously the number one team that he's rumored to go to? That's so sad.
Well, think about the other teams that are currently ahead of them in the draft order. The Giants are going to be taking a quarterback. Yeah. The Raiders are going to be taking a quarterback. And then I think they're third. So if I look at Hankathon right now, New England could be the one to jump them because they have Drake May. So maybe he becomes a Patriot. That could be fun.
I see that in my head a lot more clearer than I see him wearing a Jacksonville jersey. Panthers? No. Panthers would fuck him up worse. That's the crappy
Titans?
thing. That's the really
Browns?
Wow. Are we just listing all of the teams that could ruin this man's entire career? Like,
I'm just listing all the teams that are currently
I
within
know.
striking distance.
I just mean that's the really crappy thing about how I guess drafts in general work is just the fact that Travis Hunter is the type of like he's the type of talent where like you want him to go like as a fan of the sport who wants the sport to grow. I want Travis Hunter to go to a team where he's going to be able to develop on both sides and become that Shohei Ohtani of football, like type thing, right? Like who doesn't want that? That would grow the game in a crazy way, and I think, like you said that obviously this is something that hasn't happened a lot in the previous 100 years. Depending on what Travis Hunter does in the next 10, that could change, right? Like it's that type of thing, and I don't know. I don't want to see him go to Jacksonville. Not Jacksonville, man. That's gonna be fucking. That's not what we want. Jacksonville will not be a place where football changes.
No, and I mean you go down the board and it doesn't get much better.
No,
even if you're going to like the 4-10 teams, Jets
No,
or
it's not
Bears.
gonna-
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Bears maybe, but that's a long shot.
Yeah.
To get that pick. No,
Oh,
it'll be interesting. But I mean, you bring up Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani was on the Angels for how many years and
That's
made
true.
playoffs how many times, right?
But
And still had that same impact.
they also developed Mike Trout, so one could make the argument that their talent development, or at least elite talent development, wasn't bad. It was their ability to
That's
add
true.
to that. That was the
That's
problem. Bring in guys who could just play their roles. That might have been that was a little bit worse for them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see wherever he goes. Hopefully, he's got a good support system around him. I mean, most of those teams we listed will probably have new coaches by the
True.
time the draft rolls around. So maybe there'll be an interesting coaching staff. I'd pay money to see a Ben
I
Johnson
was about to say the
offense with
same
Travis
thing.
Hunter.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Ben
Imagine the
Johnson,
trick plays
that
they
would
could-
be perfect.
Imagine the trick plays they could run with that shit. You don't need
I
Penny
feel-
Sewell to throw a pass. Just give it to Travis Hunter.
I feel
He's
like
three
Ben
positions.
Johnson, if there is a world where Ben Johnson goes to Jacksonville, I feel like he'd be writing that into his contract. If I'm coming here,
You must
Hunter's
pick Travis
coming here.
Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter's coming
Yeah.
here. Like I feel like that's a match made in heaven right there.
Well, we'll see. Looking forward to the draft already. That's what we're doing.
Oh,
I
terrific.
see
So-
how
So
as
are
a,
the
Se- as a
Jaguars.
Seahawks fan, that's what I'm doing too. Yeah.
What's Shedeur Sanders thing after every time the Raiders lose? That's you. with
Shedeur-
the- You know what I'm talking
Shedeur
about.
Sanders draft status?
No. After
Uh,
every time the Raiders lose,
Oh,
what's the thing he tweets out?
Praise God or
Praise
whatever.
God. Yeah, no, that's us. We're all praising God out here.